Picture this. The year is 1882, and the American frontier stretches endlessly under a blood-orange sky. In the heart of the untamed West, where survival depends on grit and gunpowder, a small town called Cedar Ridge faces its darkest hour. Massive. Herds of wild buffalo driven by an unknown force thunder across the plains like a living earthquake, destroying everything in their path. When hope seems lost and terror grips every soul, one man's journey will redefine what it truly means to be a hero. But before we dive into this incredible tale of courage and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this one will change how you see heroism forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cedar Ridge as Jack Harper adjusted his worn leather hat and surveyed the horizon from the town's main street. At 32, Jack had seen enough of the frontier to know when trouble was brewing. The air carried an unusual tension, a stillness that made even the horses restless in their stalls. Cedar Ridge wasn't much to look at, a collection of weathered wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, and about 200 souls trying to carve out a living in the harsh wilderness. But it was home to these people, and Jack had been drifting through for the past 3 days, earning his keep by helping the local blacksmith. "Jack," called out Samuel Morrison, the town's mayor and general store owner. His face was pale with worry as he hurried down the dusty street. "You need to see this." Jack followed Samuel to the edge of town, where a small crowd had gathered around old Pete Hawkins, a grizzled scout who'd just ridden in from the eastern plains. Pete's horse was lathered with sweat, and the man himself looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Tell him what you told us, Pete," Samuel urged. Pete spat into the dust and wiped his mouth with a trembling hand. "Buffalo, Jack. More buffalo than I've seen in 20 years of scouting. Must be near 1,000 head, maybe more. They're moving west, fast and angry, like something's driving them hard." "Buffalo migrate," Jack said calmly. "It's what they do." "Not." "Like this?" Pete shook his head vigorously. "These ain't migrating, son. They're running scared, stampeding in a straight line toward us. And there's something else." He paused, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Saw smoke rising from the Hartwell ranch yesterday. Went to investigate this morning. Nothing left but ash and trampled earth." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. The Hartwell ranch was only 15 miles east of Cedar Ridge. "How long before they reach us?" asked Sarah Chen, the schoolteacher. "At their current pace?" 2 days, maybe 3, Pete replied grimly. Jack studied the eastern horizon, his mind racing. He'd dealt with stampedes before, but never anything of this magnitude. 1,000 buffalo could level Cedar Ridge in minutes. "We need to evacuate," Samuel said, his voice cracking. "Pack what we can and head west to Fort Collins." "And abandon everything we've built," protested Martha Williams, the saloon owner. "This is our home, Samuel." As the townspeople argued, Jack noticed a commotion near the church. A woman was running toward them, her long brown hair streaming behind her, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "Help me," she cried, stumbling as she reached the crowd. "Please, someone help me." Jack was the first to reach her, catching her arm as she nearly collapsed. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" "My son," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "My little boy, Tommy. He's only 8 years old. He went out to check our traps this morning and never came back. I've searched everywhere, but with these buffalo coming—" Her voice broke into sobs. "What's your name, ma'am?" Jack asked gently. "Elena Rodriguez. We have a small homestead about 5 miles northeast of here. Tommy knows these lands like the back of his hand, but he's never been gone this long. Something's happened to him, I know it." Jack looked toward the northeast, where the buffalo herd was approaching. If the boy was out there, he was directly in the path of the stampede. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Samuel said carefully, "I understand your fear, but we can't risk anyone else's life. The buffalo will be here soon, and—" "I'll find him," Jack interrupted, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. The crowd fell silent. Elena looked up at him with desperate hope in her dark eyes. "Jack, you can't be serious," Samuel protested. "It's suicide. Even if you find the boy, you'll never outrun 1,000 buffalo." Jack adjusted his hat and checked his Colt .45. "Maybe not, but I've got to try." "Why?" Martha asked. "You don't even know this woman or her boy. Why risk your life for strangers?" Jack was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes distant. "Because sometimes, ma'am, doing what's right isn't about knowing someone. It's about knowing yourself." He turned to Eleanor. "Can you draw me a map to your homestead? Show me where Tommy likes to play." With shaking hands, Eleanor sketched a rough map in the dirt, marking her cabin, a nearby creek, and a cluster of rocks where Tommy often hunted rabbits. "He's a good boy," she whispered. "Smart and careful, but he's just a child." Jack knelt beside her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'll bring him home, Mrs. Rodriguez, I give you my word." As Jack prepared his horse and gathered supplies, the townspeople watched in a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Jack," Samuel approached him as he tightened his saddle, "if you're really doing this, you should know." Pete saw something else. Out there. Riders. Men driving the buffalo, using fire and noise to keep them moving. Jack's jaw tightened. Rustlers. Worse. Word is it's the Blackwood Gang. They've been terrorizing settlements from here to Colorado, using buffalo stampedes to cover their tracks while they loot and burn. The pieces began falling into place in Jack's mind. The Blackwood Gang was notorious for their cruelty and cunning. If they were driving the buffalo towards Cedar Ridge, it wasn't just about destruction. They planned to pick clean whatever remained, all. "The more reason to stop this," Jack said, mounting his horse. "If I can find the boy and figure out how to turn that herd, maybe we can save the town too." As Jack rode out of Cedar Ridge, Elena's desperate cry echoing in his ears, he didn't know that his journey would test every belief he held about courage, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to be a hero. The sun climbed higher as Jack pushed his horse Ranger across the rugged terrain toward Elena's homestead. The landscape was a study in contrasts. Golden grasslands broken by rocky outcroppings and dry creek beds, all under a sky so blue it seemed painted. But Jack's attention was focused on the eastern horizon, where a growing cloud of dust marked the approaching buffalo herd. After 2 hours of hard riding, he reached the Rodriguez homestead, a modest cabin with a small corral and vegetable garden. The place was eerily quiet, with no sign of Tommy or any disturbance. Jack dismounted and began searching for tracks. Near the corral, he found small boot prints leading northeast toward the creek Elena had marked on her map. The tracks were clear and purposeful. Tommy had been walking, not running. Whatever had happened to him, it hadn't started here. Following the trail, Jack rode toward the creek, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The thunder of hooves was growing louder, and he estimated the herd was now less than 10 miles away. The creek was nearly dry, just a trickle of water running between smooth stones. Tommy's tracks led along the bank toward a cluster of large boulders about a mile upstream. As Jack approached the rocks, he heard something that made his blood run cold, the sound of men's voices and cruel laughter. Dismounting quietly, Jack crept closer to the boulders. Hidden among the rocks, he could see 3 men gathered around, a small figure tied to a tree. Even from a distance, he could tell it was Tommy, a small boy with dark hair, his face streaked with tears and dirt. "Please, mister," Tommy was saying, his voice small but brave. "I ain't done nothing wrong, just let me go home to my mama." One of the men, a tall figure with a black beard and cruel eyes, laughed harshly. "Your mama's gonna have bigger problems than a missing boy real soon, kid. When them buffalo come through, there won't be nothing left of your little town." Jack recognized the description from wanted posters. Silas Blackwood, leader of the notorious gang. The other 2 men were likely his brothers, Marcus and Cole. "Why are you doing this?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling but defiant. "Because we can," Silas replied, spitting tobacco juice near the boy's feet. "See, kid, we've been driving that buffalo herd for 3 days now, using fire and gunshots to keep them moving toward your precious Cedar Ridge. When they stampede through, folks will be too busy running for their lives to notice us cleaning out the bank and the general store." Marcus, a stocky man with a scar across his cheek, chuckled. "And if anyone tries to stop us, well, accidents happen during stampedes." Jack's jaw clenched with anger. These men weren't just thieves. They were willing to destroy an entire town and kill innocent people for profit. And they were using Tommy as insurance. Carefully, Jack circled around the rocks, using the terrain to stay hidden. He needed to get closer, but 3 armed men against 1 would be suicide in an open fight. He had to be smart about this. As he moved, Jack's mind raced through possibilities. The buffalo were still hours away, but he could hear them now. A-e-e-e-e, distant rumble like approaching thunder. If he could free Tommy and somehow turn the herd, he might save both the boy and the town. Then he remembered something his grandfather, a former cavalry scout, had told him years ago. Buffalo are herd. Animals, boy. They follow the leaders. Turn the leaders and you turn the herd. Jack positioned himself behind a large boulder about 30 yards from where Tommy was tied. He could see all 3 men clearly now. Silas was cleaning his rifle, while Marcus and Cole were playing cards on a flat rock. Drawing his Colt .45, Jack took careful aim at Silas, but as he prepared to fire, Tommy suddenly spoke up. "My pa was a soldier," the boy said, his voice stronger now. "He fought in the war and told me that bullies like you always get what's coming to them." Silas stood up angrily, raising his hand to strike the child. "Your pa ain't here now, boy." That was the moment Jack had been waiting for. As Silas moved away from cover, Jack fired. The shot echoed across the rocks as Silas spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. "Sniper!" Marcus shouted, diving for cover behind the rocks. Cole grabbed his rifle and began firing wildly in Jack's direction, bullets ricocheting off the stones around him. Jack rolled to new cover and returned fire, his shots precise and calculated. "Who's out there?" Cole yelled. "Show yourself, coward." "Name's Jack Harper," Jack called back, reloading quickly. "And I'm here for the boy." The gunfight continued for several minutes, with Jack using the rocky terrain to his advantage. His years of experience showed as he moved from cover to cover, each shot carefully aimed while the Blackwood brothers wasted ammunition. During a lull in the firing, Jack heard something that changed everything. The thunder of hooves was getting much louder. Looking east, he could see the dust cloud was much closer than he'd expected. "You hear that, Harper?" Silas called out, still clutching his wounded shoulder. "Them buffalo will be here in less than 2 hours. Even if you kill us all, you'll never get that boy to safety in time." Jack's mind raced. Silas was right, they were running out of time. He needed to end this fight quickly and figure out how to deal with the approaching herd. Making a desperate decision, Jack broke from cover and charged toward the rocks where Tommy was tied, firing as he ran. His bold move caught the gang off guard, and his accurate shooting forced them to duck for cover. Reaching Tommy, Jack quickly cut the boy's bonds with his knife. "You okay, son?" Tommy nodded, tears of relief streaming down his face. "Yes, sir. Are you here to take me home?" "That's the plan," Jack said, lifting the boy onto his shoulders. "But first, we need to deal with some very angry buffalo." As they prepared to make their escape, Cole Blackwood appeared from behind a rock, his rifle aimed directly at them. "End of the line, Harper," he snarled. But before Cole could fire, a new sound filled the air, the war cry of Apache warriors. A band of 6 Apache riders crested the nearby hill, their faces painted for battle. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated. The Apache warriors rode down the hill with practiced precision, their war cries echoing off the rocks. Jack instinctively pulled Tommy closer, his hand moving to his gun. But something in the lead warrior's posture made him pause. The Apache leader, a man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes, raised his hand in a gesture that was clearly meant to be peaceful. He spoke in accented but clear English. "The white man who fights the buffalo drivers," he called out. "We have been watching." Cole Blackwood, caught between Jack and the Apache warriors, looked around frantically. "Indians!" he shouted to his brothers. "We're surrounded!" But the Apache leader ignored the Blackwood Gang entirely, his attention focused on Jack. "I am Joseph Running Bear of the Mescalero Apache. These men," he gestured toward the gang, "have driven the sacred buffalo from their natural path, causing great harm to the land." Jack slowly stood, still holding Tommy protectively. "I'm Jack Harper. I'm trying to stop them and save this boy." Running Bear nodded approvingly. "We know. We have watched you fight with honor. The buffalo thunder toward the white settlement, driven by these evil men's fire and noise. Many will die if they are not turned." Silas Blackwood, still clutching his wounded shoulder, spat angrily. "Since when do Apache care about white settlements?" Running Bear's eyes flashed with contempt. "We care about the buffalo. They are sacred to my people, not tools for your greed. You have made them instruments of destruction, and this cannot stand." Marcus Blackwood raised his rifle, but before he could fire, 2 Apache arrows whistled through the air, striking the weapon and sending it spinning from his hands. "Your fight is finished," Running Bear declared. "Surrender, and you will live to face white man's justice." The remaining Blackwood brothers looked at each other, then at the 6 Apache warriors surrounding them. Outnumbered and outmatched, they slowly raised their hands. "Tie them," Running Bear instructed his warriors. In Apache, then turned back to Jack. "The buffalo will be here soon. Do you have a plan to turn them?" Jack looked toward the approaching dust cloud, now clearly visible on the horizon. "I was hoping to find the lead animals and somehow redirect them, but I've never dealt with a herd this size." Running Bear studied the terrain thoughtfully. "There is a way, but it is dangerous. Buffalo follow the leaders, yes, but they also follow the path of least resistance. If we can create a barrier they cannot cross and give them an easier path." He pointed to a narrow valley that ran north-south, about 2 miles west of their position. "That valley leads away from your settlement and toward the open plains where the buffalo belong. But we would need to block their current path and guide them to the valley entrance." "How?" Jack asked, though he was beginning to understand. "Fire," Running Bear said simply. "A controlled burn across their path, with riders to guide them toward the valley. But it must be timed perfectly." Tommy, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "There's an old lightning-struck tree about a mile west of here. It's been dead for years, real dry. If you set it on fire, the flames would spread across the grass in a line." Running Bear looked at the boy with respect. "You know this land well, young one?" "My pa taught me before he died," Tommy said proudly. "He said knowing the land could save your life someday." Jack felt a surge of admiration for the boy's courage and intelligence. "That could work, but we'd need riders positioned at exactly the right spots to guide the herd once they hit the fire line." "My warriors and I will take the most dangerous positions," Running Bear said without hesitation. "We know buffalo, and our horses are trained for this kind of work." "I can't ask you to risk your lives for our town," Jack protested. Running Bear's weathered face broke into a slight smile. "You are not asking. We are choosing. The buffalo are sacred to us, and these men have corrupted them. We will restore the natural order." As they spoke, the thunder of hooves grew louder. Jack estimated they had perhaps an hour before the herd reached their position. "What about them?" Jack nodded toward the captured Blackwood Gang. "Leave them tied here," Running Bear said. "If we succeed, they will face justice. If we fail," he shrugged, "the buffalo will decide their fate." Jack looked down at Tommy. "Son, I need to get you somewhere safe before we try this." "No, sir," Tommy said firmly. "I know these lands better than anyone. You'll need me to show you exactly where that dead tree is." "Absolutely not," Jack said. "I promised your mother I'd bring you home safe." "And you will," Tommy replied with surprising maturity. "But first we have to save the town. My mama's there and all my friends." Running Bear studied the boy carefully. "He has the heart of a warrior, and he speaks truth. We will need someone who knows the land." Jack struggled with the decision. Every instinct told him to get Tommy to safety, but the boy was right. They needed his knowledge of the terrain, and time was running out. "You stay with me at all times," Jack said finally. "And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir." Running Bear was already organizing his warriors, speaking rapidly in Apache. Two of them mounted their horses and rode toward the approaching herd to scout the exact position and speed of the buffalo. "We have perhaps 40 minutes, Running Bear announced when his scouts returned. "The herd is larger than we thought, maybe 1,500 animals. But they are tired from being driven so hard." Jack checked his weapons and mounted Ranger, pulling Tommy up behind him. "Then let's go save a town." As they rode toward the dead tree Tommy had described, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the strange turn of events. Hours ago, he'd been a drifter passing through Cedar Ridge. Now he was working with Apache warriors to stop a buffalo stampede. The dead tree was exactly where Tommy had said it would be, a massive oak struck by lightning, its bare branches reaching toward the sky, like skeletal fingers. The surrounding grass was dry as tinder. "Perfect," Running Bear said, dismounting. "We set the fire here and extend it in both directions. The flames will create a barrier the buffalo cannot cross." As the Apache warriors began preparing the fire line, Jack looked toward the approaching dust cloud. The thunder of hooves was now a constant rumble. "You scared, Mr. Harper?" Tommy asked quietly. Jack considered lying, then decided the boy deserved honesty. "Terrified," he admitted, "but sometimes being scared just means you understand how important something is." Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "My pa used to say that brave ain't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." "Your pa was a wise man," Jack said, checking his rifle one more time. Running Bear approached them, his face grim. "The fire is ready. My warriors are in position. But, Jack Harper, you should know. What we attempt has never been done with a herd this size." Jack looked at the Apache leader, then at young Tommy, then towards Cedar Ridge where Elena and 200 other souls waited unknowingly. "Then we'd better make sure we do," he said simply. The thunder of 1,500 buffalo hooves was now so loud, it seemed to shake the very earth. In the distance, Jack could see the dark mass of the herd, a living avalanche bearing down on them. It was time to discover what kind of hero he really was. The earth trembled beneath their feet as the massive buffalo herd approached, a dark tide of muscle and horn stretching across the horizon. Jack could now make out individual animals in the front ranks, massive bulls with heads lowered, their eyes wild with fear and exhaustion. "Light the fire." Running Bear shouted over the thunderous noise. Apache warriors touched burning brands to the dry grass around the lightning-struck tree. Flames leaped to life, spreading quickly in both directions to create a wall of fire nearly a mile long. The smoke rose thick and black against the blue sky. "Tommy, you stay right here by this rock," Jack commanded, pointing to a large boulder well away from the fire line. "No matter what happens, don't move until I come back for you." "But Mr. Harper—" "No arguments, son. This is the most important job of all. Staying safe so I can keep my promise to your mama." Tommy nodded reluctantly and took position behind the boulder. Jack could see the fear in the boy's eyes, but also trust. Running Bear rode up beside Jack, his face painted with traditional war markings. "My warriors are positioned along the valley entrance. When the herd hits the fire line, they will turn north. We must be ready to guide them." Jack checked his rifle and revolver one final time. "What's our signal?" "The eagle's cry," Running Bear said, then demonstrated with a piercing whistle that somehow carried over the thunder of hooves. The buffalo were now less than half a mile away, and Jack could see the terror in their eyes. These magnificent creatures had been driven beyond endurance by the Blackwood Gang's cruelty. "There!" Running Bear pointed toward the front of the herd. "The lead bull, the massive one with the scarred horn. Turn him and the others will follow." Jack saw the animal Running Bear meant, an enormous bull that stood out even among the giants around him. His left horn was broken halfway up, and his eyes blazed with fury and fear. The herd hit the fire line like a living earthquake. The lead animals reared and bellowed, confused by the sudden barrier of flames. For a moment the entire stampede seemed to pause, 1,500 animals milling in confusion. Running Bear gave the eagle cry, and suddenly Apache warriors appeared from concealment all along the valley entrance, waving blankets and shouting to guide the confused buffalo. But the scarred bull wasn't following. Instead, he turned west, directly towards Cedar Ridge. "He's going the wrong way," Jack shouted. Without thinking, Jack spurred Ranger forward, riding directly into the chaos of the confused herd. Buffalo surrounded him on all sides, their massive bodies creating a forest of muscle and horn. One wrong move and he'd be trampled to death in seconds. The scarred bull was pushing through the herd, his massive head lowered, leading a group of perhaps 200 animals toward the gap in the fire line where Cedar Ridge lay beyond. Jack rode alongside the bull, trying to turn him, but the animal was too large and too determined. In desperation, Jack fired his rifle into the air, hoping the noise would startle the bull into changing direction. Instead, the gunshot seemed to enrage the animal further. The bull turned toward Jack, his good horn lowering for a charge. Time seemed to slow as Jack found himself face to face with nearly a ton of angry buffalo. Ranger danced nervously beneath him, but there was nowhere to run. They were surrounded by the herd. Then, impossibly, Jack heard a young voice shouting over, "The chaos! Mr. Harper, this way!" Tommy had left his safe position and was standing on a small hill to the north, waving his arms frantically. But more importantly, he was holding a burning branch from the fire line, creating a new point of light that caught the scarred bull's attention. The bull paused, confused by this new obstacle. In that moment of hesitation, Running Bear appeared. On the other side of the animal, his own horse trained for exactly this kind of work. Together, Jack and Running Bear began the delicate process of turning the massive bull. Using their horses' agility and their own courage, they gradually guided the confused animal away from the path to Cedar Ridge and toward the valley entrance. The scarred bull finally gave in to the pressure, turning north and taking his followers with him. Like water finding its natural course, the entire herd began flowing into the valley, following the path of least resistance away from Cedar Ridge. Jack rode clear of the herd and immediately galloped toward Tommy, his heart pounding with relief and anger. "What did I tell you about staying put?" he demanded as he reached the boy. Tommy's face was streaked with tears and soot, but his eyes shone with pride. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, but I could see that big bull was going the wrong way. I remembered what my pa taught me about using fire to guide animals." Jack's anger melted away as he looked at the boy's earnest face. "You saved the day, son. That bull would have led half the herd straight to town if you hadn't given us that distraction." Running Bear rode up to them, his face breaking into a rare smile. "The boy has the instincts of a true warrior. The herd is flowing into the valley as we hoped. They will reach the open plains by nightfall." In the distance, they could see the last of the buffalo disappearing into the valley, the thunder of their hooves gradually fading. The immediate crisis was over. "What about the Blackwood Gang?" Jack asked. "My warriors have them secured," Running Bear replied. "They will be delivered to your town's law enforcement." As they rode back toward the rocks where they'd left the gang, Jack felt a profound sense of completion. Not just because they'd saved Cedar Ridge, but because he'd discovered something important about himself. The Blackwood brothers were exactly where they'd left them, tied securely and looking thoroughly defeated. Silas glared at Jack with undisguised hatred. "You think you've won something, Harper?" he snarled. "There's always another town, another score." Jack dismounted and walked over to face Silas directly. "You're right about one thing. There's always another town that needs protecting, And there are always men willing to stand up to bullies like you." He turned to Running Bear. "Will you and your warriors escort these men to Cedar Ridge?" "It would be our honor," Running Bear replied. As they prepared for the journey back to town, Tommy tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Mr. Harper, are you really going to stay and help protect other towns?" Jack looked down at the boy who had shown such incredible courage, then toward the valley where the buffalo were finding their way back to freedom, then finally towards Cedar Ridge where Elena waited. "I think I might, Tommy. I think I finally understand what I'm supposed to be doing with my life." The ride back to Cedar Ridge was triumphant. Word of their success had somehow reached the town ahead of them, and the entire population turned out to welcome them home. Elena ran to meet them, tears streaming down her face as she pulled Tommy into her arms. "Thank you," she whispered to Jack. "Thank you for bringing my boy home." "Thank you for giving me the chance to do what was right," Jack replied. Mayor Morrison approached with the rest of the town council. "Jack, we can't thank you enough. The whole town owes you a debt we can never repay." "No debt," Jack said firmly. "This is what neighbors do for each other." Running Bear and his warriors delivered the Blackwood Gang to the town jail, then prepared to depart. As the Apache leader mounted his horse, Jack approached him. "Thank you for your help today. I couldn't have done this without you." Running Bear studied Jack's face carefully. "You fought with honor today, Jack Harper. You showed that not all white men have forgotten how to live in harmony with the land. My people will remember this." As the Apache warriors rode away into the sunset, Jack found himself surrounded by grateful townspeople, but his attention was drawn to Tommy, who was telling his mother about their adventure with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. And then Mr. Harper rode right into the middle of all them buffalo, Mama. He wasn't scared of nothing. Elena caught Jack's eye over her son's head and mouthed, "Thank you once more." That evening, as the town celebrated with an impromptu festival in the main street, Jack sat on the porch of the general store, watching the festivities. Samuel Morrison joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "So what's next for you, Jack? You planning to move on like you always do?" Jack sipped his coffee and considered the question. For years he'd been drifting from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. But today had changed. Something fundamental inside him. "I think I might stick around for a while," he said finally. "Cedar Ridge seems like the kind of place that could use a man who's not afraid to stand up when trouble comes calling." Samuel smiled. "The town council was hoping you'd say that. We've been talking about hiring a proper sheriff." Jack looked out at the celebrating townspeople, Elena dancing with Tommy, the schoolteacher Sarah laughing with the other women, even old Pete Hawkins telling exaggerated stories about the day's events. "You know what I learned today, Samuel? Heroism isn't about being the fastest gun or the bravest man. It's about being willing to put other people's needs before your own, even when you're scared. And you think you can do that?" Jack stood up and adjusted his hat, the same gesture he'd made that morning when this all began. But now it felt different. Not like a man preparing to drift away, but like someone getting ready to build something lasting. "I think I already did," he said simply. As the celebration continued into the night, Jack walked over to where Elena was sitting with Tommy. The boy was finally showing signs of exhaustion from his ordeal, leaning against his mother's shoulder. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Jack said, tipping his hat, "I wanted to make sure Tommy was doing all right." "He's fine, thanks to you," Elena replied. "But I think he has something he wants to tell you." Tommy looked up at Jack with sleepy but serious eyes. "Mr. Harper, when I grow up I want to be just like you, someone who helps people when they're in trouble." Jack knelt down to the boy's level. "Tommy, you already are someone who helps people. You showed more courage today than most grown men ever will, but remember, being a hero isn't about the big dramatic moments. It's about the small choices you make every day to be kind, to be honest, and to stand up for what's right." Tommy nodded solemnly. "I'll remember, Mr. Harper." As Jack walked back toward the hotel where he'd been staying, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. This morning, he'd been just another drifter passing through. Tonight, he was a man who had found his purpose. The thunder of Buffalo Hooves had faded into memory, but the echo of Elena's desperate cry, and his decision to answer it, would stay with him forever. In choosing to help a stranger's child, he had discovered not just what kind of man he wanted to be, but what kind of man he already was. Cedar Ridge slept peacefully that night, protected by the knowledge that sometimes, when darkness seems overwhelming and hope appears lost, ordinary people can choose to do extraordinary things. Jack Harper had ridden into town as a drifter. He would wake up tomorrow as Cedar Ridge's new sheriff, a man who had learned that true heroism lies not in grand gestures, but in the simple, desperate acts of compassion that define our humanity. The buffalo had returned to their natural paths. The Blackwood Gang faced justice, and a little boy was safe in his mother's arms. But most importantly, a lonely cowboy had discovered that home isn't a place you find. It's a choice you make to stop running and start building something worth protecting. And there you have it, the incredible true story of how one man's choice to answer a desperate mother's cry changed not just the fate of an entire town, but redefined what it means to be a hero in the untamed American West. Jack Harper's journey reminds us that heroism isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing to act despite our fears. It's not about grand gestures or legendary deeds, but about the simple decision to put others' needs before our own when it matters most. If this story of courage, redemption, and unlikely alliances moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell for more incredible tales from the American frontier. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose compassion over comfort. What did you think of Jack's transformation from drifter to hero? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget, sometimes the most important battles we fight are the ones nobody else will ever know about. Until next time, remember, the thunder of buffalo hooves may fade, but the echo of courage lasts forever.